MLayton, and my project this year was biochemistry and the well-being of humanity. Topic, but in itself, science itself is a big topic. The definition of science is knowing, so it's really endless, which is why I find it interesting because there's not really a limit that we've discovered yet to know about the world and beyond. So my first place of research was Indoor Biotechnologies, which is an allergen lab in Charlottesville. And next to me is my mentor, Mr. Brian Smith. He was one of the head researchers of the analysis team at in bio, and he was a very nice man, and he showed me around, and he was always willing to contact me. I would, whenever I needed to email him, he'd email me within 10 minutes. It was, in addition to Mr. Smith, I also shadowed many of the other employees because everyone had their own individual job. There were maybe 25 people working in this big lab, and they each had their own job. And it was just really interesting to see the whole dynamic. In addition to the employees, there were also other interns there. And this one, it might look like I just took a picture, but she was really cool. She actually told me, I'll pose and you take a picture. So she was cool. My time with her, and her and I both shadowed the same people usually at the same time, and I would even watch her because she'd been there for about 3 months by the time I got there. So science is very complex, and this is what scares most people because, for instance, this is what's considered the most simple test in allergen testing, which is called the ELISA assay. If one component is off, the whole test fails. So even if something at the very beginning just doesn't work, it could have been a success if that had worked, but if it doesn't work, then it failed, and you can't tell. So that's what's very complicated, and it has to be very precise. Begin with this, it's very simple to the people who know what they're doing because they've done it so many times that. So this is a well plate, and this is what they usually see. At the top, you'll see the control where it's darker than lighter. And then at the bottom are the samples. That's a higher level of the allergen, and that's bad usually when you're testing it because you don't want a lot of the allergen. So as you can see, this one 3 down probably has a lot of allergen in it because multiple well plates. So complex and newer test. It's called the Maria test, and this can actually test multiple allergens at once. And this is the machine that does it. It uses a computer and a needle to find these little tiny beads in this solution. If there's an allergen in it, they will connect to the beads, and the computer will read it and tell you how many of them actually have the allergen on them. So another thing I liked about this lab is that in addition to samples, they also made their own subjects. So these are some antibodies. I don't know if you can tell from the screen, but this one right here is more purplish, and that means it's newer. And then the ones on the other side are a little bit more orange, and that means that they're older. So those were going to be thrown out in a couple days. So in addition to these things, I also found interesting that they had old and new equipment. This is a newer chromatography machine. This was about $20,000. So this is a newer chromatography machine. It regulates it easier so that the pipette and stuff doesn't dry out, which is bad because once it dries out, it's really. And it also cuts the time. But then they also still had the old chromatography, which, yeah. And they also had newer pipettes, which I was lucky to use this because they only had about 3 of them, but they were very useful because they actually did each thing so precisely while time, and you have to reset it each time. You to use old and new technology while I was here. So I found that interesting. And as you can see, right here, I'm actually preparing for a tour group that came on my second day, which I was very happy to do because the reason I actually decided to do this was because we went on a tech tour when I was in 11th grade, and we went to this facility, and this is actually what awakened my science love, because I've always liked science since I was little, but I kind of forgot about it. And then I saw here, and they put little solutions in. When you put the other solution in, it actually made a smiley face, and I thought that was so cool. So I actually got to prepare this for another tour group, which I thought was cool because. So here's another example of them making their own test subjects. These are yeast cultures, and they're always making new ones because they're always needing more. And the yeast can actually grow many things depending on what they want. Interesting as well. Another thing I was also grateful to be able to do was they gave me a kit to collect my own dust sample from my house, and we actually did a test on it. And I'm happy to say that my house is allergenic. I got to actually do my own test on my own dust sample, which was very hands-on, and I was very happy to do this because I got to see the whole process. I went was Ty River Elementary School along with John and Dylan, and we taught the second graders about STEM programs. So main supervisor was Miss Sharon Aldridge, and for 2 weeks we stood in front of a class of about, was it like 40 or 80? I think it's like 40 each of second graders. We taught them about science, technology, engineering, and math. Usually to small kids, you would think that wouldn't be interesting, but I was surprised at how much they knew, but also how much they didn't know. They were really willing to learn, and they listened, and we rarely had to calm them down, even though they were very hyper. Good questions, and I was so happy to answer them. Whenever they had a question, I would try my best to go over to them as quick as I could and tell them their question. And at the beginning, they were kind of bored about it, and they were just like, "Oh, why do we like? It helps us get out of our class, but why?" But then by I'd say a few minutes into it, really excited about it, like really excited. So I was really happy to see how many of them were inspired by this, and it made me feel good because if more younger children were interested in science and technology and other STEM subjects, a better place, because it is necessary to know, even if you're not going into the field, it's a good thing to know some science and some technology and mathematics and engineering just for basic survival. This was the last project we did. I just wanted to add this because one thing I thought was cute is that every day for the first 2 days, they'd be like, "Explosion, are you going to do something explosion?" So the last day we went in, we did the Mentos and Coke experiment. We taught them about it, and the whole time they were just like, "We're going to see it explode." And we'd be like, "Yeah," and they went wild. So I guess this whole thing leads up to, I just believe that science is important. And personally, I have a very scientific way of thinking. So when I was younger, it confused me that people didn't think the same way I did. Lack of scientists and all these other genius minds. But I believe that it starts young. If you teach these children about this stuff, they are interested in it and they do want to learn, because our minds are made to learn at a young age. To like middle school and high school, you think, "Oh, it's just another class that I need to graduate." I really think that we need to destroy that mentality because these are very needed things. To conclude, I guess, my future plans, I'm glad to say off college in Lynchburg, and I will be going there. And I will probably end up transferring to Vanderbilt University to fulfill my graduate for probably chemistry. And as in for future students of government school, everyone will tell you not to procrastinate. Everyone will tell you to get your work done. But I just want to tell you, obstacles, there will be failures, and you just need to know. Don't get too anxious about it because that just makes it worse. And you just need to know how to get through them with a calm mind because experiments is that when we did the chromatography, the first day we did the chromatography, we used normal paper instead of coffee filters. That didn't work well. They got sad because it didn't work. So, but the next week we came in and we used it and it worked. So just keep a level mind and keep your mind open and just know that there will be failures, but you can do your best to get through it. And that concludes. Any questions?
You're so excited about science. It makes me very happy. Do you see yourself maybe doing research, or do you think you want to teach, or do you maybe combine the two?
And I was very surprised at how well I did with these children because I'm usually scared of children. But I work well with young children. I do notice that. So if my first plans don't work, I might go into teaching. But my first plans would actually be going into pharmaceuticals, not the actual like making them and testing stuff like the allergen lab. So yeah, that would be my goal is to go into pharmaceuticals.
Excellent.
Any other? Colin?
So what exactly is done with the research that I know the allergen lab?
Oh, okay, yes, I forgot to say this. What they do is that some people will send them in samples. Like for instance, my first day, there was a whole bunch of like pouches, and I don't know if that's the right word, but there was like carpet pieces, and I was like, "What are these for?" And they were like, "Oh, a company sent these in and wanted us to test the dust." So I watched them for the 3 days I was there, hang these up with water in them, and they would shake them out, and then periodically they would pour the water into a beaker and then test it. So the reason they do this is like think that allergens are just like pollen and maybe a peanut allergy, but really there's like severe dust allergies, peanut butter allergies, pet allergies, minimal allergies, but some people it can be the difference between life and death. So it's very important that this research is done. Thank you.
You're doing a lot of research.
Yeah.
Research project. But my question is, how did you go about getting entry into the culinary school? Like, did you propose an idea?
We did go through like a proposal process, but luckily I believe they came to us and I think it was like a mix between they came to us and we came to them, and we were like, hey, we should start a STEM program, and then we principal and we said which grade should we do, what time should we do, and what should we learn about. That took some planning because on our part, and then when the principal came and talked to us, but seriously. So yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I have the same question for you as I asked John. What's the overlap or common ground between your internship and your community service?
I believe the internship I did more just to learn more about biochemistry and just science itself. I would teach the children here about it. And so I think the internship was more of the goal and the finish line. Community service was more of the starting point. Because, like I said, if you start at a young age, you can do stuff like this and you can make a difference in the world. I had to go into these fields.
Interesting you position them that way because in your presentation and I think in your actual process, you worked in reverse. You started with the internship and then went to the community service. Did you feel that positioning yourself as a student in your internship, your instruction at all in your community service?
Because I'm usually not that good at explaining myself. So that was one obstacle I did have to overcome was explaining myself to a younger generation that doesn't terms that I know and I think is common sense, but they don't. I believe though it was more of a stretch to become the teacher than it was the student because I'm used to being the student. I'm a high schooler, but to actually teaching people, which was why I was so happy at how well it turned out, and they seemed to be understanding surveys, like they enjoyed it. So I think there definitely was some correlation in my mind after the internship of how to teach them, stretch to be a teacher.